Secrets kings tried to hide from history. One king erased his own wife from history, not by killing her, but by making sure she never existed. No records, no portraits, no trace. And the worst part? It worked. Rulers like Henry VIII didn't just control kingdoms. They controlled memory, because power isn't just about ruling people. It's about deciding what the world is allowed to remember. Scandals disappeared. Betrayals were rewritten. Entire events erased. And here's the unsettling truth. What we call history today might only be what they allowed to survive. So the real question isn't just what happened. It's what was deliberately removed. To uncover what kings tried to hide, you have to understand one thing first. History wasn't always written to be accurate. It was written to be useful. And for many rulers, controlling that narrative was just as important as controlling armies. Take Henry VIII, publicly. He was a powerful monarch who reshaped the English church and secured his legacy. But behind that image was a pattern of decisions driven by personal desire and insecurity. His multiple marriages weren't just political, they were deeply personal, often ending in scandal or execution. When relationships failed, the narrative didn't blame the king. It was rewritten. Wives were accused, discredited, or removed entirely, while official records framed his actions as justified, even necessary, because when you control the story, you control the judgment. And Henry wasn't unique. Look at Ivan the Terrible. His reign is remembered for brutality, but even that image is complicated. Some accounts portray him as a paranoid tyrant who unleashed violence on his own people, including the killing of his own son. But other records, often influenced by political rivals or later historians, may have amplified or reshaped events. The truth sits somewhere in between, buried under layers of propaganda, fear, and selective documentation, which raises a difficult question. Are we seeing what really happened, or what survived? Then there's Louis XIV, the Sun King. He perfected the art of image control. His palace at Versailles wasn't just a residence, it was a stage. Every detail, from architecture to ceremony, reinforced his power and perfection. But maintaining that image required constant management of information. Failures, unrest, and financial strain were carefully masked behind displays of wealth and control, because weakness, once visible, could become dangerous, and sometimes secrets weren't just about reputation. They were about survival. In courts across Europe and beyond, royal families dealt with internal conflicts that rarely made it into official records. Rivalries between heirs, hidden illnesses, questions of legitimacy, these were issues that could destabilize an entire kingdom if exposed. So they were concealed, quietly handled, removed from the narrative before they could spread. In some cases, individuals themselves were erased, names omitted, roles minimized, contributions reassigned, because history, when controlled, can be edited. Even in ancient times, rulers understood this. Pharaohs in ancient Egypt sometimes ordered the removal of predecessors from monuments, literally chiseling out names and images to erase them from memory. If a ruler fell out of favor, it wasn't enough to defeat them. They had to be forgotten. That's a level of control that goes beyond power. It reaches into legacy itself. And then there's the role of court historians. Many of the records we rely on today were written by individuals who depended on royal favor. Their position, their safety, even their survival could depend on how they portrayed the king. So naturally, their accounts often leaned toward praise, justification, or silence when it came to controversial events. It wasn't always lies, but it wasn't always truth either. It was selective. And over time, those selections shaped what we now call history. Another layer comes from diplomacy. Kings didn't just rule internally, they interacted with other powers. Alliances, betrayals, secret negotiations, many of these were kept hidden to avoid conflict or maintain strategic advantage. Documents were sealed, messages coded, intentions disguised. What was happening behind the scenes often looked very different from what was presented publicly, because in politics, perception can be more powerful than reality. And the deeper you look, the more you notice a pattern. Secrecy wasn't the exception. It was part of the system. Rulers weren't just managing people. They were managing information, deciding what would be remembered and what would disappear, which leads to an uncomfortable realization. The version of history we inherit isn't just shaped by events. It's shaped by decisions about which events were allowed to be seen. And that means some of the most important truths might be the ones that were hidden the best. And this is where the story becomes even more unsettling, because some of the most carefully hidden secrets weren't just about image. They were about legitimacy. For a king, the appearance of rightful rule was everything. Bloodlines, heirs, and succession had to look flawless even when they weren't. If doubt crept in, it could destabilize an entire kingdom. Take Richard III. His rise to power is one of the most debated in history, largely because of what followed. The mysterious disappearance of his young nephews, often referred to as the princes in the Tower. Official explanations were vague. Records were incomplete. And over time, narratives emerged that painted Richard as either a calculating usurper or a ruler framed by his enemies. But here's the key point. We don't have a clear answer, because whatever truly happened wasn't preserved clearly enough to confirm it. And that uncertainty, it's not accidental. It's the result of power shaping what survives. Then there's Catherine the Great, a ruler known for intelligence, reform, and expansion. But her rise to power involved a coup against her own husband, Emperor Peter III. His sudden death shortly after being overthrown raised immediate questions. Officially, it was explained in ways that avoided direct blame. But historians have long debated whether his death was orchestrated or simply convenient. Again, no definitive answer, just layers of interpretation. Because when a ruler controls the aftermath, they influence the memory. And sometimes, secrets weren't about single events. They were about entire systems. Look at Qin Shi Huang. He unified China, standardized systems, and left behind one of the most significant legacies in history. But he also ordered the burning of books and the suppression of intellectual opposition. Texts that challenged his authority or presented alternative ideas were destroyed, not just hidden, eliminated, which means the history that followed wasn't just incomplete. It was curated, and once knowledge is removed, it doesn't just disappear in the present, it disappears from the future. Another layer of secrecy comes from personal vulnerabilities. Kings were expected to embody strength, stability, and control. But in reality, many struggled with illness, both physical and mental. These conditions were rarely documented openly. A king's weakness could invite rebellion, encourage rivals, or shake public confidence. So it was concealed, managed behind closed doors, explained away, or simply omitted, because perception wasn't just important. It was essential. And then there's betrayal. Royal courts were filled with alliances that shifted constantly. Advisors, generals, even family members could become threats. When betrayals occurred, they were often rewritten to protect the crown. Failures were blamed on others. Internal conflicts were reframed as necessary actions. The truth, messy, complicated, and dangerous, was simplified into something more acceptable, something more controlled. And over time, those controlled versions became the dominant narrative. But here's the deeper, more uncomfortable realization. History doesn't just lose information by accident. Sometimes, it loses it by design. When records are altered, when voices are silenced, when events are reshaped, the result isn't just a gap in knowledge. It's a constructed memory, one that reflects power more than truth. And the further back you go, the harder it becomes to separate the two, because evidence fades, documents disappear, and what remains is often what was allowed to remain. Which brings us to the core question: how much of what we know is real, and how much is refined? Because when kings controlled not just their kingdoms, but their narratives, they didn't just influence their own time, they influenced ours, the stories we tell, the figures we remember, the truths we accept. And once you start to see that pattern, history stops feeling fixed. It starts feeling edited. If this made you question what you thought you knew, then you're starting to see history differently, because the past isn't just a record, it's a version, one shaped by power, silence, and survival. If you want more hidden truths, untold stories, and the secrets history tried to bury, make sure you subscribe and stay with us. Because the deeper you go, more you realize, history isn't just written by the victors, it's rewritten by them.